Welcome to this month's edition of Charlie Tango Talks. This month we're going to do a talk about virtual currencies and cryptocurrencies. And because it's such an international topic, we're going to do this conversation in English. And today I have a guest, and that is you, Henrik Hoffmeyer. Thank you very much for coming.
It's a pleasure.
I think it's fair to say that you are one of our leading experts within virtual currencies and smart payments and cryptocurrencies. You have a background from IBM and from Nets, and currently as a co-founder of Coinify, one of the largest companies in the world regarding virtual payment systems. Mm-hmm. Couldn't you start explaining us a little bit about your background and why you ended up being an expert in this rather special area?
And thank you for the words, Tim. It's a pleasure being here at Charlie Tango. So my background is, yes, indeed, somewhat technical. I started with in IBM in the 90s doing internet, which was very innovative technology back then, and was fortunate to be part of one of the projects where we actually did one of the first secure electronic payments on the internet, together with Visa and VeriSign. Then spent close to a decade with Oracle, and that was through the entire period of e-commerce and e-business, and you might also recall the dot-com boom and bust. And so that was a lot of fun. I think it was in 2007, I went out of the corporate world and joined entrepreneurial startup environment, only to be dragged into first Pandora's IPO, where I was in charge of the technology journey of scaling Pandora. And then subsequently, I was fortunate to be part of Nets' IPO, where it was a lot about new technologies of mobile payments and tokenization in this new evolving theme of disruption of financial services. But yeah, you can say payment has always been interesting. And I think my cryptocurrency journey started in 2012, I believe, when Mark, my business partner, said I needed to look into this Bitcoin stuff. And I think I did the same as everyone else and discarded it as being somewhat of a hoax or a pyramid scheme or something. But fortunately enough, I spent some time studying it and found out that this was quite innovative technology.
Yeah.
And that was in principle the start of the journey towards Coinify.
Yeah. And before we get to Coinify, I think just to clarify, when we talk about cryptocurrency and virtual currencies, like Bitcoin, and also I think the second largest cryptocurrency is the Ethereum-backed coin called Ether. Mm-hmm. Couldn't you start by kind of explaining to us what is a cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so cryptocurrency, as it is known, is part of a bigger theme now called virtual currencies. So we call cryptocurrency if it's based on some sort of crypto technology.
Which basically means that it's encoded or encrypted.
Yes, which means that it's encrypted or using cryptography. But it now appears that there are other types of, let's say, virtual currencies. And in order to understand what a virtual currency is, a good comparison would be a digital currency. Because a digital currency, as you would use on a daily basis, like the euro or Danish kroners, is in principle a digital version of the physical counterpart. So coins and notes, that would be the physical currency. So digital currency is a digital representation of the physical one. In this new space, there is no physical cash. I mean, you cannot walk around with a Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's only on the internet. So therefore, there is a consensus that this type of currency, which is not issued by a central bank, which doesn't have a physical counterpart, is called virtual currency. Yeah. Whether or not it's crypto-based or it could be, in principle, centralized coin. In principle, you can say your SAS Eurobonus points would be some sort of virtual currency because you can actually buy stuff
exactly
with your points.
Yeah.
So that will fall into this bracket of virtual currencies.
Yeah. And I would have to kind of trust SAS that my points are worth something.
Yes, you would of course need to
and I guess that's one of the central issues when we talk about currencies is trust, because you have to kind of trust somebody that your money is worth something. And if you look at the Danish kroner, you would have like kind of our central bank that are kind of the one that are guaranteeing the value of the Danish kroner. Who's actually guaranteeing the value of a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin?
No one. And that's the challenge for many people, is to how can you have trust in something which seemingly doesn't have any intrinsic value? You can say, what is the intrinsic value of your currency? Well, it's a paper note. Maybe you can burn it and it has some sort of intrinsic value, but you feel it has value because you can pay your taxes with it, right? So it has some value. You get paid in it for your work, but why do you believe it has value? In this space of cryptocurrencies, it's much more difficult to say what is the true value. So there you would need to turn to the market and say, well, the market determines what is the value of a Bitcoin. And as we sit here today, the market has determined that let's say the monetary value of a Bitcoin is around $8,000 US dollars.
Yeah.
And that's how money is being.
Yeah. And it started out with a value of $1, right? Or something like that.
Or zero.
Oh, zero, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So if it's a bit like hard for people to understand, what are kind of the advantages of having this kind of digital gold like Bitcoins, for example? How is this helping us if we compare it with traditional currencies?
Yeah, so you make a comparison there to gold, which is potentially relevant. There has been many people trying to compare this new theme with something, and digital gold is a good comparison. There is a mining process, and there is fewer and fewer of those Bitcoins that can be mined, so that makes sense. But gold has a lot of disadvantages. It's tied in the physical world. You cannot just pay someone across the world in gold, because you would need to have it in your hand in order to appreciate the value of the gold that you received. So you call this digital gold? Yes, because it can be moved globally. It is a digital representation of something of value. One Bitcoin can be divided into 100 millionth units, called a Satoshi. So you can say that you can transfer a very, very small amount instantly globally, and you could do it at a very, very competitive price. And I think one of the, let's say, the main themes here is about the friction that you will find in existing systems, where you need to have a high level of trust in other people, in the balance of an account, or you need to have some sort of custodian bank taking care of your money. In the space here, all of that is removed, and technology has disrupted money. It has disrupted the need for you to verify those things. You simply have Bitcoin, and you can transfer those Bitcoin, and somebody else has it. So there are many types of benefits for that. One thing is, of course, the low transactional cost. And the instant ability to transfer funds during a weekend, overnight, something that is appreciated by many people.
Yeah, and if you compare it with the physical world, it's up to 10% of the value of a transaction that goes actually to transactional cost, right? So for poor people that want to transfer money back to their homeland where they come from, to their parents or something, they often pay up to like 10% in a fee just to transfer the money. Whereas if they can do it with a digital currency, that transaction cost will be close to zero, right?
Yes, you can say that's a use case often mentioned as something that cryptocurrency solves. I still think there is a challenge here, because one thing is that you can move this type of cryptocurrency from A to B quickly and efficient. But the challenge is, how do you get into cryptocurrency in the first place? And what can you use cryptocurrency when you receive it on the receiving end?
You have to change it back, right? Yeah.
Either you have to do that, or stores, or let's say places where you go and use it would have to accept that as means of payment. But it's just to show that there are a lot of friction in the financial system. A lot of the friction is going out because of the competition, right? So we will find that payments are getting cheaper and cheaper, transfers are getting cheaper and cheaper. So I think that one thing is it has, let's say, a use case for removing that cost and friction, but it also has a store of value that is now being appreciated by, maybe not so much here in Western Hemisphere, but in countries where you do not have the same trust as we do in central banks and the banks. There we can see a use case for people who want to be their own bank, or maybe just get a bank because they are not interesting for a bank as a customer. Now this technology enables anyone to start saving, to start putting funds in, starting to have a wallet and be able to spend money.
Yeah. But I think it's fair to say that if you look back at Bitcoin, for example, first of all, we don't know exactly who invented it, which kind of gives us this kind of myth around it, because nobody knows exactly where it comes from. It it became really successful at that point of time where we all were a little bit like kind of scared of banks because we had the big financial crisis in 2008. But still, there is kind of a bad reputation of that. At least there has been to Bitcoins. It also, for a lot of people, they think that this is kind of like a safe haven for illegit value. Is that fair, or is that not? Is that really happening, or how is it about that?
I think it was probably fair in the beginning. There's no doubt that when we saw the opportunity to establish Coinify, we also saw into an industry which was very immature, which was probably trying to circumvent, if not avoid, let's say, authorities. And the reason why we established Coinify was exactly to, let's say, legitimize an emerging theme and approaching everything from a very regulated manner. The problem was that a lot of these criminals have since then found out that Bitcoin is very traceable. It's very difficult to be anonymous.
It's extremely traceable.
And actually one thing that I think many people find out on later stages is that one thing is you can trace it into the past, but you can also trace it into the future, right? So if you are a criminal and if you have used this type of technology, then you have to look over your shoulder forever, because if there is some sort of digital footprint that could be tied to any transaction related to any of the funds that you have misappropriated, then eventually you'll get caught. And I think criminals have found out years ago, and actually what we see in the industry, that they have moved onwards to different types of new cryptocurrency, unfortunately Monero, which is an anonymous coins, which Coinify doesn't support. But they have also moved back to cash, because if there is something that competes with this, then it's cash. Cash is still being used for these types of transactions.
Interesting. And you touch on a pretty interesting thing here, is that there's not just one cryptocurrency. I don't know how many there are, but there are, last I heard a number of like 600 or something like that. Maybe there's even a lot more than that. And Bitcoin is by far the most known and maybe also the most used. The second most used is another one called Ether, which is backed by a platform called Ethereum. And can you try to explain the difference between these two cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, so Bitcoin really solved a very, very difficult problem. So I think it's important to understand when Bitcoin emerged, it was part of a longer story. Cyberpunks have been working for years trying to develop digital scarcity. I mean, in the world we have today, everything can just be copied. So everything that can be copied loses value. So how do you create something that has digital scarcity? And people have been working for this for years. But Bitcoin was the first to solve the problem of having, not just solving the issue of making something digitally unique. Satoshi Nakamoto, who is the founder of Bitcoin,
and we don't even know if it's one person or
no,
it's a consortium. We
don't
know, but that's, we don't know that.
Seemed to have solved a lot of issues, and one issue was to have digital scarcity. Another issue is how do you distribute money? I mean, how do you generate money and distribute it in some sort of way where I don't just generate 21 million Bitcoins and give it to you? I mean, how can that give any value? You and I are going to be very rich in a currency nobody wants. So Satoshi also made a very, very brilliant way of distributing these types of coins. And now we have mined 18 million of the 21 million. Because
there's going to be a finite number of Bitcoins, right?
21 million, yeah.
That's it. And when these 21 million Bitcoins are mined, there's not going to be any more.
Yes, so you know exactly the monetary policy of Bitcoin for today and for the next 120 years. You'll know exactly how many Bitcoins are going to be in circulation. And in the year 2140, there's going to be 21 million, and that's it. But I think that in terms of the innovation of Bitcoin, solving that problem is an amazing achievement. And in principle, making money is just one of many applications that this technology can be used for. But obviously, if you were able to create something called digital scarcity, money would be a product, or a currency would be an area that you would try to disrupt. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that this is a theme about disruption of money, of the currency that we use on a daily basis. This theme is very big. We know what happened to the music industry when the MP3 format came around. We know what happened to newspapers when the internet came around. So what will happen with this theme and currency as we know it? Will this be a theme where people start storing value in Bitcoin like gold? I think it's very interesting to see now, and see even on CNBC, when they're talking about potential of a financial recession, they're saying, or global recession, they're saying, is it time to go into gold and Bitcoin?
Yeah.
So it's not no longer a theme of whether or not Bitcoin actually can hold value. It's a matter about, do you believe in it or not?
So we're looking at a current monetary system that was invented way before the internet and the digital age. So that is one of the reasons why everybody's talking about it's time for us to reinvent the whole monetary system. And part of the innovation that came around when Bitcoin was introduced was not just the fact that you had the coin on top, but that was the underlying technology, right? Which is the ledger technology, also known as the blockchain, because it's this blockchain technology that holds the information about ownership, and that makes it possible for me to send you money in a very secure and safe way that can always be backtracked. So we have kind of had the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years where the talk has been much more on the underlying technology, the blockchain technology, because of all the possibilities that that technology provide, like validating ownership and authenticity, and also a thing like smart contracts. And as I understand it, the Ethereum blockchain is made not for distributing money, but for all these other use cases, right? Correct. And the Ether is kind of just the one that you kind of had to attach every kind of transaction you have to do. Is that right?
Yeah, you can say that. Well, if we just compare Bitcoin to what we know as currency, then Ethereum was in principle much more complicated financial products. So maybe Bitcoin would be comparing to internet your TCP/IP. I mean, putting a protocol in place so data packages can move from A to B. Yeah. But Ethereum was in principle HTML or Java, where you can start to program stuff. Yeah. And I think the emergence of Ethereum shows something about this theme. Because when Ethereum first was, let's say, launched, they financed the company by doing, in principle, what we would know as an IPO. Yeah. But they programmed it all. So, in principle, using Ethereum, they programmed a share. And we know a share is something that you buy and you hold in custodian. Maybe you receive dividends, but you're able to sell the share to somebody else, and then he can have the custodian control. If the company is sold off, then the proceeds of that would also fall to the shareholders. All of that was programmed into an Ethereum contract. Okay. So in principle, you're now removing banks, auditors. I mean, amazing achievement. And when I think they only raised maybe $20 million or something, but they showcased a technology innovation where we weren't talking about disruption of money. We were talking about very complicated financial products that was, let's say, disrupting. And that gave birth to the entire ICO market, which in 2017 and 18 was raising billions and billions of dollars using this type of technology.
And maybe you can explain to us what initial coin offerings or ICOs, what that really means?
Well, in principle,
if you're a startup, for example.
Yeah. So one of the challenges for many startup companies is to raise capital. Yeah. And here you have a technology where, in principle, you can have anybody put money into your company as an ICO, and in principle, that could be $1. I mean, there's no lower limit to this type of financing at a very, very low cost. It's all programmed, so you don't need to cater for it. And the dividend payouts or the processes in terms of you being a shareholder, all of that is enforced through a contract using the blockchain. And the good thing about it is that the contract is actually also put on the blockchain. So it also operates in this type of global computer, which is an amazing innovation in itself. I mean, you don't need to have a server and protect the security. It's all, let's say, trusted
and distributed.
And this type of technology is very difficult for, I would say, for people who have not spent the time studying it to understand how is this possible. But I think technology is now showing that it can disrupt not just currency as we know it, but also very complicated financial products, even loans and derivatives are now starting to be disrupted by this technology.
Yeah, and we see logistic companies like Maersk investing in their own kind of blockchain system for contracts. We see it in aerospace as well. Every place where you have a lot of information. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, and these are pretty much all based on this open platform called Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have the kind of their own blockchain, and they have their own currency. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So back to Coinify a little bit. Could you explain to me what kind of services is it that you provide for kind of like businesses and maybe also for me as a private person?
Yeah, so basically we do two things, and that's what we spotted as being, let's say, problems to be solved in this industry. Well, one thing is to get access as you as a person.
Yeah.
How do you get access to this type of cryptocurrency?
If I want to buy some.
If you want to buy some
sell,
cryptocurrencies, we offer you a platform where you can do that securely.
Okay.
Where you can be ensured that you also follow, let's say, the regulatory side. Since our inception, we have focused a lot on anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. So we would require you to fulfill a lot of questionnaires about who you are and provide us with documentations and so on. So you know also that the service we provide to you is following all the regulation. But we do, in addition to that, we also will screen the coins that you receive. So you're sure that the coins you receive are not or have been not involved in any type of illicit activity online, preferably what we call freshly mined coins. So you're sure that you're not getting any sort of tainted coins in your wallet. When you want to sell, we can also help customers who want to sell their cryptocurrency. And we also follow all the banking regulation in terms of source of funds and proof of source of funds. So we would require you to submit material that says how have you gained funds in this space. And then we help you get those funds on an account.
So to me that sounds like a marketplace, right?
Totally a normal marketplace and for buy and sell and for consumers. So what we do for merchants and payment operators is that we allow them to accept virtual currency as means of payments for products and services. And currently we operate, I think, more than 60 payment service providers, where we help them avoiding the volatility of cryptocurrencies, but also receiving a US dollar in a US account or Hong Kong dollar in a Hong Kong account instead of dealing with this type of cryptocurrencies. So you can say we help payment service providers as well.
And you are regarded as the largest in Europe right now, as I understand it.
Yeah, currently we are.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting because why do you think that a Danish company like Coinify can become the leading platform for these kind of transactions in Europe? Why is it not Germany or UK that has
there has been a lot of
sector?
Danes involved in this industry. I remember very early on, I think Denmark was overrepresented in the industry. You have Michael Grønager from Chainalysis, which has huge success in helping authorities.
Yeah, and just to explain what Chainalysis are doing.
Chainalysis is using the technology, the blockchain technology, to trace transaction and let's say understanding what has happened in terms of transactional flow. But you also have people like Niklas, also known with Bitcoin Swiss, who built, let's say, a success on these ICOs. You also have Lasse Birk, who is one of the founders in Coinify as well. Yeah. You have MakerDAO with Rune. Yeah. I think there's a lot of Danish people who have been, let's say,
but why do you think that's the case?
Maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe it's because we met at Heidi's Beat Bar in 2012 and talked about these things over a beer. I remember we started paying in Heidi's Beat Bar in Copenhagen. We started paying for beer, and we helped them accept cryptocurrencies. Because,
I mean, one of the challenges surrounding Bitcoin and one of the reasons why it kind of had this reputation is also the extreme fluctuation when you look at the value of the Bitcoin. I mean, I bought some Bitcoins back in April or May 2018, and at that time the price was around nothing. And then it raised to like $18,000 to $20,000, and now and then it fall back, and now it's up again at around $8,000. So it's very volatile still.
It is.
And is that partly because it's a new thing, or is it because there's too few people that kind of are in there and setting the value, or what do you think is the reason for this huge fluctuation?
I mean, a popular answer would be that introducing any type of new asset, there will be a high volatility.
Yeah, that's right.
If you look back to the history of oil, I mean, that has also fluctuated. Once the volume starts to increase, then the volatility slows down because it's more and more difficult to move the market.
But we had 18 million out of 21 million, and
yes,
so one could argue that we are at that level right now, right?
Yes, but it's also a matter about how much money is in the industry. Currently, you would say maybe $200 billion is in the industry, which on a, let's say, financial market level is extremely low.
Yeah.
But you will still see some, let's say, volatility in the market. And I think that will be part of the industry for years to come. But it's also, let's say, a problem to be solved. I mean, now we are seeing the emergence of the stablecoin theme, where, well, if you want to have something as use it as payment, you would like to know exactly what you're paying for this. We feel that the Danish krone in Denmark is very stable, but I'm sure that a Chinese person would not think that the Danish krone is very stable. It's all in the matter of in what context do you view this. So when we call this stable coin, then it's because with this technology you can also peg, let's say, a coin to the value of a euro. And if you are able to do that, then you can have all the benefits of cryptocurrency, like having instant transfers, zero fraud, and all the good stuff. But people still know the value of the euro or the value of the dollar. So I think the entire stablecoin theme, which is now emerging, let's say, after these, let's say, smart contracts and Ethereum and financial services innovation, you're going to see stablecoin being a very broad theme, also because it makes it more natural to get into it. If you don't want to get into Bitcoin, you probably will feel more comfortable in getting into a stable euro, having all the attributes of a cryptocurrency. Yeah.
So in a way, you could say that the Danish kroner has been pegged to the euro for the last, 10 years or 15 years. Yeah. So we have moved very, very closely in relates to the value of the euro. And that's exactly what's going to happen with stablecoin, is that you create kind of like maybe a basket of several things. It could be the price of gold, the price of dollars, the price of the share market. And then you peg the value to that, so you know exactly that it's not going to fluctuate. So you take fluctuation out of the equation, right?
Yes.
And you still have all the good stuff in there. And one of the most successful stable coins is actually also Danish. And that's a stable coin called DAI. And just today in Børsen, there was an article where you could read that the total value of the DAI, this new stable coin, is now at 550 million Danish kroner, which is still not very much, but it's still it's rather new, right? So why do you think that they have been so successful? It's also a small Danish company, partly Danish, I would say, because it's an international crowd behind it.
Most companies are now international, but you can say yes, it has a very strong team, a founding team with Rune leading it.
Yeah, some clever guys.
Yeah. I think what they did was, I mean, stablecoin has been around as a theme for a while.
Yeah.
And of course, the first one was something called Tether, issued by Bitfinex. But their approach was, if you came to me with $1, I would issue you a Tether coin, and then you could do whatever you wanted. And then when you came back with this Tether coin, I would give you $1 back. So in principle, it was a centralized model, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you need to believe that I have those money also when you come back with your Tether.
Because I could only sell it to you.
Yes,
in a way,
and that has shown a lot of problems. So what Rune and the Maker Foundation team really succeeded at was starting to establish something which actually had some collateral backing the funds. And I think one of the most important things to understand is that it's all part of what we now call DeFi, or decentralized finance theme, where you in principle are looking to have something that operates itself with no intervention, with no central control or no single point of failure. So you can say what makes DAI very successful is that in principle it's again Ethereum. You program this stuff and you put it online on a blockchain. And if the entire Maker Foundation team disappeared tomorrow, it will still run. like the 550 million, whatever,
would
still be out there.
Yeah.
And with Tether, that's a different story because you have a central problem. And so this decentralization of financial services is now what, at least I believe, but many others believe the same, that's going to be, let's say, an underlying theme here, that you would want to have something where there is no single person that can fail the system, where it's actually something that is very open, transparent, where you can review the code and it's out there. And that's why I believe that DAI will also be very successful in the future.
Yeah.
They have now opened up, I think here in November, for collateralizing these types of products with other things than just
Ether.
Other things than just Ether.
Yeah.
Which is going to be very exciting to watch.
So the whole idea is that in order to acquire these DAIs, you have to put some collateral aside, which is 1.5 times the value.
Correct.
So every time the value of the DAI would change, they would just sell to make it less interesting to own, and that's how they keep the price in balance, right?
Correct.
It's kind of the methodology behind.
Yeah. So the tricky thing is, of course, how do you make it stable?
Exactly.
And so they have actually showcased that the stability has been extremely close to.
It's a range of less than 10%.
No, much less.
Okay.
I mean, the volatility around the euro, like say 1 euro is 1 euro DAI, or in this case dollars. The dollar stabilization has been extremely close to zero. So they are very, very successful in proving that not only have they programmed this correctly, but it actually works.
Yeah.
So that's going to be very exciting to watch. And I think you will see more and more companies moving into this, because if you as a company can settle worldwide in a currency, including Saturdays, right?
Yeah.
Instantly, with no counter risk or counterparty risk. I mean, this is very attractive.
Yeah.
It's very attractive compared to existing currencies and existing financial infrastructure. This is very interesting. And I think you'll see a lot of companies starting to review this as a way of transacting.
And one very interesting example of another stablecoin initiative is a project called Libra, which is co-founded by Facebook, but in a consortia with, I think, right now, approximately 20 other partners, and their goal is to launch this new currency in 2020 with 100 partners. Can you explain to us what the whole Libra project is about?
Yeah, so actually, I think for the industry, it came a little bit of a surprise.
Okay.
I mean, this is the first, let's say, massive scale initiative, which is in principle following through on the original Bitcoin vision, right? Of having something global distributed, instant transferable, very low cost in terms of friction.
And 2.5 million people that already have a Facebook account.
Billion,
2.5 billion.
Yeah. So it's in principle it's taking this theme mainstream. So currently, if you look at Bitcoin, that is, let's say, maybe one sort of environment. But having Facebook releasing something like this on a technology like this that can actually deliver on all of those, let's say, benefits, it's a massive disruption of what we know as, let's say, existing finance and currency. I think the initiative is a great initiative. You might say that the way that it has been executed has not been ideal, and you're also seeing a huge backlash now from senators and also from the banking industry. And it actually makes, to some extent, sense that you cannot just release something like this. But Libra is, in principle, taking the foundation of the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency theme and making it available in a stablecoin format, so everybody will know what is the value, and they will feel that it's quite stable.
Yeah.
They envision that it's going to be backed by the major currencies like the dollars and various other currencies in a basket. Maybe some gold in there, who knows? But anyway, something that is perceived stable by most people, right? And imagine that currency unfolding for 2.5 billion people, in principle making a global Venmo, or in Danish context would be a mobile pay that's global, right?
Exactly.
Making it absolutely easy at zero cost.
Yeah.
That shows the true force of this theme. And that's also why we in Coinify are, let's say, blockchain agnostic. We would support Libra on the same level as Bitcoin. Because for us, enabling Libra would just be a drop-down list, and suddenly all our merchants would be able to accept Libra for a payment.
So let's imagine that they succeed. Then I would have this global currency that kind of was accessible through a platform I already use every day, being Facebook or Messenger, where I can pay or transfer money or do other stuff, rent, whatever, with a transaction cost that is close to zero.
Yep.
And every time I pay for something with my credit card, the transaction cost is around, you know it better than me, 2 to 4%.
It depends on who you are, where you are, but yeah, it's significant.
Yeah,
it's significant.
And if I needed to transfer money to an African country, it would be even higher.
Correct.
So in a way, this is really, really fascinating, but it's also, I understand that a lot of people get extremely scared about this, and that's also why we see like there's a lot of hearings, especially in the US, about this, because Facebook, to be honest, they haven't been that good at handling data. They had all these big cases, and of course a lot of people say, if you cannot handle my personal data, would I want you to handle my money as well? But that's not really the case, is it? It's not Facebook who's going to handle your money. It's a consortia.
Yeah, there's many, let's say, misunderstandings about what Facebook has actually done. Yes, you can say that Libra will be in its own setting. It will be separated from Facebook. And David Marcus, who is in charge of this
CEO,
of this Calibra wallet, also tries to convince the Senate that this is going to be, let's say, two separate things and so on. So, but in principle, regardless, if these 2.5 billion people are able to utilize this technology, wouldn't that just be great? I mean, wouldn't it just be great if you were able to do new stuff at a lower cost? I mean, I think everybody will be happy about that. But that doesn't mean that you're able to execute on the overall initiative here. Because there's a lot of central banks, there's a lot of regulation. Each country will have their own take on this. So it's going to be a very, very long journey.
And even so, it was just within the last few weeks, we have seen that Visa and MasterCard and I think eBay and PayPal, they have kind of at least gotten their logo erased from the website. They might be supporting secretly, but they are not founding partners any longer. And why is it that these big players are kind of have left the negotiation table?
I mean, I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing that, I mean, look back 5 years, who would have thought that everybody from Donald Trump to more or less every central bank is discussing cryptocurrencies on a regular basis. Now we have the entire Senate involved in this process. And I think this is what you need to be aware of. This theme is not going away.
No.
Actually, it's just gaining momentum and momentum and momentum. And this Facebook Libra is, in my view, also, let's say, just one of several initiatives. You'll see something coming up from Walmart soon. You'll see something from Amazon. So the entire, let's say, theme of using, let's say, privately issued currency to solve real-world problems at a lower cost with less friction and in an easier way.
In a traceable way. And
that's going to happen. Now, is Facebook the right one to do it? Based on their history, probably not. Maybe it's going to be difficult for them to have a role. But also remember that Facebook, at least themselves, also position this because if they don't do it, who else would?
Yeah.
And so we know that China is working on these types of things, and we know that Facebook also has competition.
And that's one of the big challenges in the US because when you listen in on the talks in the Senate, you kind of get that feeling that these senators, they don't really understand what this is all about. But at the same time, if they are too hesitant or too negative, you might see that this development will come from Asia instead, and we'll all end up with an Asian-controlled coin instead. So they also have to kind of be in the game.
Yeah, and I think actually from a European perspective, the Commission and the Parliament has been quite smart about this because they have also had more of a see and observe position, and in principle try to support it in the right way instead of just, let's say, hamming a big regulatory.
It's not going to happen
now. Yeah. So they have been more, let's say, supportive and but also looking at this as from an opportunity perspective.
So I've been researching a bit, and you see very highly placed bankers from JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley and the CEOs saying that nice idea, it's never going to happen, this Libra project. Do you think it stands a chance to actually be a real thing, or do you think that this is just like a start and then another example will come along?
I think it's dangerous to think that a Silicon Valley-based company like Facebook considers governments as anything else but a stone on the road to where they're going.
Yeah.
If you look back into history, look at Airbnb or Uber, let's say political resistance, even laws that has to change, has not obstructed their rollout strategies for countries. I mean, we have seen demonstration in France, we have seen what happened in Denmark, but it's just baked into a business model of approaching this theme. So I would actually say that, yes, Facebook has a fighting chance of releasing this, and all it takes is a couple of countries to adopt this, and then suddenly people are going to say, well, they get all these benefits. What about us?
Snowball is rolling.
And potentially,
Personally, I think one of the things that needs to happen for cryptocurrencies to be really popular and really successful is that it needs to be easier to understand and easier to use. I think that there's still a usability issue here. Have you seen any digital solutions out there that you would recommend in terms of usability, user friendliness? If for example, I want to buy a few coins just for the fun of it, I want to store it in a wallet, I want to be able to maybe pay with it in a store on a new kind of credit card. Who are the big players here? Who has the best solutions right now?
Yeah, some of our customers have.
That's fine.
I think, we operate some of the biggest wallets in the world. Blockchain is very successful.
So the company called Blockchain?
A company called Blockchain,
okay.
blockchain.com.
Yeah.
And I think they do a very, very good job in managing people's funds in a very user-friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you first looked at this theme 3 years ago, I mean, it's a completely different story today. If you're on board with BRD, that I know you tried.
It's another company.
One of our customers as well.
Great solution,
or Abra, you'll find it's more or less like opening your mobile pay or Venmo account.
Yeah.
And when you pay, it's QR codes, and I mean, everything will be useful for you.
Yeah.
You can say one of the challenges is where can you then spend Bitcoin?
Yeah.
But that's another problem that is now being solved, where you can actually just click a button and then they send you a Visa or MasterCard, and then you in principle just use your Visa MasterCard in the store, and then that will do the conversion in cryptocurrencies for you.
If let's take an example, I want to buy a pair of sneakers worth 1,000 kroner. I use my special credit card that is tied to my Bitcoin wallet. And once I pay 1,000 kroner, then on the back end, there will happen a transaction where the company would sell for 1,000 kroner Bitcoin and do the transaction automatically and put it on the ledger.
Yeah.
So for me, it would be like paying everything else.
Yeah. In principle, you can say what Coinify does today is to allow you to use Bitcoin to pay, but we pay the merchant out in so-called fiat currency or dollars or euros. In principle, here is the same. Yeah. The merchant doesn't see anything but a normal Visa transaction. What happens in the background is for a company like Coinify to convert, let's say, the cryptocurrency into fiat and front the payment.
And make sure that I already have the money on my bank account.
Yes. Okay. So in principle, you can say that unbanked people, as long as they can provide for suitable KYC, then they can have a payment card and start using this.
And unbanked people is still 1.5 billion in the world, right?
There's a lot of them. Yeah.
So finally, I would like to just quickly talk with you a little bit about the future, because this is still rather new and a lot is happening every day. So if you kind of vision where we are 5 to 10 years from now, what do you think will happen?
5 to 10 years is a long time.
Yeah,
Tim,
but we all know that it's not going to happen overnight, right? So
I think that when we founded Coinify in 2014 as a company, we knew that this was going to take a while to get mainstream. And you can say...
That's 5 years ago.
And that's 5 years ago. And now we are here talking about Facebook introducing this stuff. So in 5 years is a very long time frame. But what I think is important is to understand that this is part of a very large theme which is called trust and decentralization. So there is a need for trust.
And reinvention of money, right?
Yes, and that's also trust, because you trust your money, right? But many other people don't.
No.
So a lot of Bitcoiners getting involved in Bitcoin, they would say, well, what happens in the next financial crisis? I mean, will I be sure to have my money and so on? Maybe here, yes, but Other countries, they are quite uncertain.
Exactly.
And so this has a very trust-based theme. The decentralization is about that things cannot anymore be controlled by one entity. It has to be something, because you can solve this in a decentralized way. You can have many parties being involved in a very, let's say, low-cost model. So why not do that? But in terms of what happens in the cryptocurrency space, we will just get more and more momentum. In Coinify, we have all-time high every month.
Yeah.
So why would that change?
Yeah.
Even in the Bitcoin price might go up and down.
Do you see a tipping point where this suddenly becomes really, really popular, or is it just going to be a stable development?
No, there are going to be some, let's say, inflection points. One of the inflection points could be Libra.
Yeah, exactly.
And the inflection point could also be a global financial recession where banks are challenged paying out. I mean, if you start to have problems taking out cash out of an ATM, you'll start thinking about alternatives.
Exactly.
When you start to have negative rates of, -3 or 4%, you'll start looking at alternatives.
But what is the future for currencies like the Danish kroner, for example? Is that going to go away and be substituted by digital currency, or are these going to coexist?
The Danish kroner is not going away. I mean, two certain things, death and taxes, and as long as you have to pay your taxes in Danish kroner,
but that could change as well.
Yeah, but I think the theme of cryptocurrency is going to be alongside what is called sovereign currencies.
Okay.
And I think they're going to solve different problems.
Okay.
And I don't think that you'll see a world where there's only going to be one currency that we all use. I mean, currency solves different problems. And you can say, how many currencies can there be? I mean, probably not 2,000. But different currencies solve different problems.
Different things, yeah.
And I think you're going to see more currencies evolving over time. And people are going to select what they use, kind of currencies, depending on the situation. Or maybe they will just have an app control it for them. Maybe they don't even need to make a decision.
This is such an interesting topic. I mean, reinventing money is something that is going to inflect all of us. Unfortunately, our time has come, and I think I would just end up by saying that, as with any other new technology, the best way to kind of getting to understand it is to get your hands dirty. So I would urge everybody to kind of go out there and acquire, maybe for 500 kroner, Bitcoins, just to kind of get a feeling of how is it to buy, how is it to hold, how's the value going to change, where can I use it? Don't invest in it, but buy a little bit so you kind of get into the game and get used to that this is actually an alternative that will be around forever, and it's just going to grow and grow. Thank you so much for coming, Henrik. It was really, really interesting, and I hope you found it interesting as well. We'll be back next month again. Thank you for listening in.